Hi, welcome to the award-winning Ed Brown Show. And I tell you, we got something unique. We're going to talk about history. We're going to talk about African American history here in Prince George County. And we have a #1 curator here, Nancy Saxon from Fairmont Heights. I've known Nancy for a long time. She's done a lot of work, but you just wait and see. Don't go anywhere. Welcome, Nancy, to the Ed Brown Show. It's a privilege to have someone in Prince George County that know quite a bit about Prince George County, specifically Fairmont Heights. At the time now, they're talking about the Pittman House, getting rid of that and that type of thing. Just tell us, how did you get involved in Prince George County?
I got involved in Prince George's County because when I got married, I wasn't used to living in an apartment. And my uncle and my mother, they said we had a plot of land in Fairmont Heights, and for me to go look at it. And so where I live in now, in Fairmont Heights, I'm there because it was a wedding gift.
The house was a wedding
the
gift.
wedding gift. I'm
Oh,
still in
wow.
the same little house.
A lot of people like that type of wedding gift.
And it became a wedding gift, like, because my family, they were bricklayers, and my mother, she saw that I got it, and I'm still there. And then as I moved there, it was dirt roads, and I couldn't understand why it was dirt roads, no sidewalk, and you had to go out there and burn your trash in different, and I just couldn't understand it. And couldn't understand why on one side of Addison Road, people over there had sidewalks, and we were over there, they called the bottom. They didn't have, and so I just didn't understand what was going on. And so then the Mrs. Luckett, Mother Luckett, the Honorable Mother Luckett, she was at Sylvan Vista. So I asked her about it, and then she told me, they just didn't do nothing because they called us the bottom. By me working in D.C., I had to work in a clinic. I worked for public health service. So my uniform was white. So ordering to get out in the morning to go to work, and here I was dipping in dirt and water and trash to go downtown. And so that's how I really got involved to see what was going on in the town of Fairmont Heights.
Okay, well, tell us, about this Pittman. Pittman's association with Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee. Tell us a little bit about that. It's in the news now about destroying this historical site. Tell us, how did you get involved in that? Give a little history of Mrs. Pittman. Mrs. Pittman was the daughter of Booker T. Washington. All right.
The thing is that how I got involved, because back then when schools were segregated, and then when I got to go to Cardozo High School, then they told us to write on Negro History Week, what George Washington Carver had found during Roosevelt's era.
And George Washington Carver was a great scientist, the peanut scientist.
The peanut scientist.
Right.
So I would write every year, and the only person I used to write about that went to Tuskegee. So when I got out and I got married and after school, then when I moved to Fairmont Heights and I read this, and then I look here, I'm living in the historical town, one of the only historical towns in the world, I would say. Everybody say, don't say it.
Yeah, well, what about Miss Pittman? Tell us a little bit of Mr. Pittman was architect. He was associated with Booker T.
Washington.
Okay, well, tell us.
They came out of Tuskegee, Alabama, and Booker T. Washington went to architect school. He did the architect with Booker T. Washington. Yeah,
this house,
right?
The Pittman house, was built by Mr. Pittman because he was architect.
He was married.
Yeah,
and he bought it when the father-in-law moved him here. He built the house on Eastern Avenue. And what's so about the house, it leans a little bit because they built them on top orange. You used to build the railroad tracks.
Right.
So that's where they lived. But Pittman, he was the architect for, he did the school. He was the architect for the Y. And then also I'm finding out that Garfield Elementary School that I went to, he was the architect for that. And so that's how I got involved. But got involved specifically with the history as a curator, as a history, because the late Margaret Brooks and the late Mrs. Gray, they had a group with Armstrong on the history with Sam Parker, and them had started for them. And Sam Parker had wrote the bylaws and all of that and got everything together for him.
But Sam Parker was a park and planning
Park and
commissioner.
planning. He was over park and planning.
Right, he was chairman.
Chairman.
Right.
And then Susan Pearl. And they came to Fairmont Heights. Well, Susan Pearl wanted to go into school that Pittman had designed, the first elementary school on 61st
Well,
Avenue.
what about Mrs. Pittman? She actually lived. Tell us a little more
She
about
was
her.
Mrs. Pittman.
Was she the only daughter of?
Was the only daughter.
Of Booker T. Washington.
Yeah, she was the only daughter. And then Booker T. Washington gave her a piano, and she was the first black in the area, the first African American did concerts, music in the Washington area. And then she used to go to the White House. And then when she didn't have a babysitter, she took the baby to the White House too and went along with her. So that's what was so interesting. Now, it's
She recently died in, what was it, 1978?
1978, she just died, and I don't know when he had died, but the thing is that house is on the National Register.
And you were responsible for that, right?
Yeah. What happened is that Jack Johnson, we went to Jack, and Jack Johnson told Sam Parker to get the money to help us to put it on the National Register. And so the house is on the National Register as a historical site.
And that was done 2005, right?
Right, but they've been
Okay.
on the National Register way back. They
Before
always
that.
was a historical house, but they just got in just before Jack left. And parking with the National Park Service, the Interior Department. So, but then I found out it's only about 3 houses that's historical site, and the Pittman House is one of them. And the Pittman House, it stands out to me so much because after the mayor from District Heights went down to Tuskegee, and he came back, he says, Nancy, he said, guess what? I said, what is it now? He said, I went to Booker T. Washington's house, and the lady was there.
That's on the campus of
Tuskegee.
Tuskegee. I've been there, and most of you need to go there
They need
because
to go there.
George Washington Carver's home is there, and also Booker T. Washington. Right.
Well, the thing is that with that, and so he came back and he called me, and Mayor Walls called, Nancy, you have to call this lady down in Tuskegee because you're working with the curator for the historical sites, and you're getting them grants for the people who want to keep their houses up historic in the town of Fairmont Heights, and you are helping it, and you have gotten it, the Booker T. Washington display on the 4th floor in the Fairmont Heights Library,
Is
one
that
of the
right?
first black libraries.
So you have a display of
It's
Booker T.
a
Washington.
permanent display up there, everything with her and everything, all the things they did with the Y, and so, but they're renovating the library, so what they would do is make another room for it, a permanent place. But back to the house. What happened is that the lady, Mr. Upshur and Mrs. Upshur, I didn't know her at first, but Susan Pearl and Mrs. Brooks told me to come on. They wanted to go to the elementary school because they wanted to see it. Then they wanted to go in and see Booker T. Washington's home. But the lady wouldn't let them in there. So I said, okay, well, let's go back around it because I knew the husband. When I went in there, the lady, his wife is there now, Maxine. She hooped and hollered, no, I don't want nothing down. I don't want to see the chimney like that old stuff. So Bernard, her husband, how I got more interest in the Pittman House because he was my client in the government because, I worked in the public health service, physical therapy. And then we got to talking and he said, Nancy. So he said, we need work on it.
So you made that a project as far as restoring.
Restoring.
And now you're talking about restoring the Pittman House.
The house.
So a lot of people think they should tear it down and things like that. But why do you think that they should restore it?
They should restore it. Now, they don't, the thing is that is the house along with Booker T. Washington. He's the architect all over the world. Everybody know him. So why are you going to tear our history down? You tear down stuff. And what I had been talking with, and June Dillard called me, and she was fussing with me about it. And so she is working on it one side. When I called Tuskegee, because I'm in tune with them.
Good.
And then the lady gave me how to go about it. Then Miss Maxine wanted to know, well, I got a lien against it. So she gave me the papers. I called California. The lady in California told me what to do, and I'm working with June Dillard and that group to come up and see how we can to get the money to rehab it.
Rehab.
Because if we got a group, and my thing is with this Ted Mack, he's with the state got money, that we want to see somebody to go in there and rehab is somebody going to like a museum. And that's where we don't want it torn down because they don't tear other places down. You got places in the ground. You don't tear them down and stick a sign up there. So what has have happened is that I called back down to Tuskegee about a week ago.
Is that right?
And the lady, Miss Harrison, called me and she stated, I said, well, tell me, do you know anybody who at Tuskegee in this United States where I can tap into to call them about the Pittman House, who's alumni? So she said, the guy who sing, you know, and I said no. Then she came up with Tom.
So on this committee, who's working with you?
Well, the only people that work with me with this program, with
the Pittman House,
with the Pittman House, they group. You have to own a historical house in the town. Not just anybody come up and said, I want to do it because I'm the mayor, I'm a this, I'm control.
So in order to be on the committee,
to work with them,
you have to own a home in Fairmont Heights.
With me. You have to, and most of the people, the all history thing was done by the Brown House and then by the lady who lived in the Pinckney House. And you know about that.
Yeah.
That go with the Pinckney, with Pittman, because Pinckney was the stewardess with Roosevelt.
Right.
And therefore.
Wow, you got a lot of information there. I don't know whether we have time to go through all of it, but really with the Pittman House, that's the thing that's on the radar. On the radar now, and you're making appeal as far as rehabbing
it,
and that the history of Mrs. Pittman and how she lived, and the association of Mr. Pittman, an architect with Booker T. Washington, is very historical.
Right.
And what we're going to do, we're going to have a second half here, and we're going to talk about some of the African American women in Prince George's County to help make it. See you in a second. Hi, welcome back. We got a very important subject here. We're talking about African American women in Prince George's County. We got a few of them here, and Nancy is going to give you information. Whatever you're doing, better sit down because you can't get this information everywhere but Ed Brown Show. Okay, Nancy, tell us about these at least 3 young ladies that put their life into Prince George's County, African American.
Well, you know, this month is Women's Month.
Right.
And I wanted to focus on, in Prince George's County, those who made a difference, women. And the 3 most that made a difference was Ruth Brown, and because Ruth Brown was the first black commissioner. Then she became the first woman mayor in town, Fairmont Heights. Ruth Brown had instrumented that designating Fairmont Heights because of the Pittman House on the National Register. She had fought for that over the years. So this is doing it. And Ruth Brown, by the Pittman House, Ruth Brown got Mrs. Gray and Mrs. Brooks them together and Sam Parker them to come up with this Friends of the Firm for Fairmont Heights Preservation. Now, Mrs. Jones, you know, she was the first female a delegate down in Annapolis, you know, African American in Annapolis.
Mrs. Jones, what's her first name?
Gertrude Jones, and she just passed. So she was the first. And the other person who did so much was Cora Rice that people never talk about. And Cora Rice, she founded UCAP, and then Cora Rice, she had an ounce and service business. She did that, and then she did one on her own. And she was very active in the community.
What about UCAP? That was
And UCAP was her pet.
okay. Well, tell us a little bit
And
about.
UCAP is, I used to sit on UCAP's board years ago with Mrs. Luckett, Honorable Mrs. Luckett, Leighton Luckett. And UCAP do for the community, and it's against poverty. They deal with rent, and they help people get homes, and they do training. So UCAP was one of the
Cora Rice.
Cora Rice.
Yeah, she
And
was.
that's another one, like the Pittman House, that should stay, and people should always recognize, rather than want to tear it down. But Gertrude was the first
Delegate.
delegate.
Yeah, in the House of Delegates.
I mean,
Yeah,
House of Delegates.
Now, some of the things that name some of the things she was involved in, just totally. You have any information on her? Great.
No, because she just passed.
I know she just passed.
And I couldn't, and they were supposed to send me something, but I know she's from out the 26th legislative district.
Right.
And she did a lot down there, and I understand she did a lot when she was down in Annapolis. And that's the thing I have a kind of concern, that we as people, we always looking at people outside of Maryland, what they did, and all over the United States. We need to start focusing on Maryland and Prince George's County, because we got a lot of firsts.
History, yeah.
History got a lot of firsts. I have a whole list of firsts. And then you got Lucy Ward, and then you go back to
Yeah,
Ruth
Lucy
Brown.
Ward,
She was
right.
the first judge, and
Right.
you got a lot of things in, here. And then Merv McLeod Bethune, she was interested in Prince George's County because they named a school after her. But then when they tore it down, they named it after somebody else, and I thought they should have left it stay like that. But that is really what Women's Month should be all about.
Well, actually, women like you all dedicate your life to Prince George County. So, just name some of the things that you yourself been involved in Prince George County.
Prince George's County?
Yeah, right.
I've been involved with on historical and culture trust, and I was on the Women's Commission, and I've been involved in working with those folks, like I say, in the town of Fairmont Heights, making sure they get grants, some grants for those historical houses. My main thing that I'm working on now, I've been doing before Jack left, and they designated the 4th floor of the library, because that was one of the first black libraries, and on that floor, and we had up there all the history. Up there, it'll be like a museum.
Right.
It'll be a museum.
Oh, the
and a reading
museum,
room.
all of that,
It'll be
the
a
Pittman
museum
House
with
is.
a reading room. And it's funny about the Pittmans. The first thing was up there is the Pittmans. Now, let me tell you something else about the Pittmans that happened to me. I had some students to come to pick up the trash with the new program. And one of the little guys asked me, he said, "Lady, you seem like you be knowing everything, talking about everything." He said, "I went to that library to look up some black African-American history stuff. And somebody told me to go up there, and it was on the wall." He said, "But lady, I go back up there, and they done took it off the wall." Why did they take it off the wall? Because that's one of the first libraries, and it's an African-American library that they did.
In Prince George County.
Prince George County. It was, and then you had Mrs. Kelly. It was with Ruth Brown that helped to shape. And all of them, they helped to shape that town. And what kind of concerned me is that if you look now, you got people moving into Fairmont Heights. They don't know the history of Fairmont Heights.
Right.
And what they want to do is change Fairmont Heights around to modernization. But in other places, when you have a historical district, that's what we are.
Right.
History, it stayed looked like a historical district. But now, if somebody come in, if you and I go in and they say, "Oh, we want to buy that house," and then when they go back to the elected official, "Well, we want to change it." How can you change somebody's history?
Oh, okay. Well, what happens if the house is in historical district? There should be some
It's a what's called a covenant on it.
covenants
It's
on
on
it,
there.
you know, so that they
They
can't
cannot
come
do it.
in. They have to, you know, all over this country they have historical districts.
Right.
And they have rules.
Rules.
Even the painting of the house.
Right.
You can't change the structure of the house or
houses.
anything else. You know what I mean? You can live there, but you really can't. And that's basically why you put.
A covenant on it.
Covenant on it, so that people
Cannot come and do what they want.
Now, in Fairmont Heights, I was just looking here. They have quite a few homes.
They have 26.
Okay, tell me about
There are
the
26
Tell us a little bit about the other 26.
Well, the 26, you got 3, I think. The Pittman House and 2 other houses. You see, HS. That's historical sites. Then you got historic resources. And history resources, you got historical resources. That means a resource to tell you something about who lived there, like Pinckney and all of them.
Give you history.
Give you history. And then you got, some of them is documented. So those are documented. Those they are documented as historical sites, and you got it in the books, and that's where you have it. So therefore, with the Pittman House and Ruth Brown, she was really wanted to that Pittman House and that school. And you know Mrs. Gray Ridley, she was one of the first graduates of that little elementary school. And so therefore, we need to keep our history intact. That town should be looking like a little historical town, like you go down the country.
Right.
A little historical town with little flowers out front. And the little lampposts, like you go up in Western Maryland and the other places.
Right.
And not like modernization, trash here and trash there. And that Pittman House, it sits almost on some part of D.C., little line right there.
Is that right?
Right, like the sidewalk
right
or the
on
yard.
the district line.
Right on the district line. So Pittman House is my pet right now. Now, June Dillon, them, you know, they are working on it. I want to know who gave them the authority to come. You got to take the lady to court. If the house is in foreclosure,
but right now, the home is owned by whom?
Mrs. Upshaw.
Okay.
And then she left out. And when she did,
and now they are trying to
knock it down.
Okay, because they are saying that
it's not safe.
They can't. It's not safe. It's an eyesore.
And they can't get no money. It's an eyesore. Well, there are other eyesores, and you got history. You know, that's not an eyesore.
Yeah, but I would think that your group, the fact that it's on a historical district site. That would be one thing that would be
right,
helpful.
the one I'm working on.
Yes. So what we want to do is a parting word now. What do you think about the Pittman House?
The Pittman House, I'm working on it day and night. This morning, the Washington Post called me, you know, and I told her I was coming here. And then last night, June Dillon called me, and she's in touch with the county exec about knocking our history down. And Carla reading them at the county. Now, I'm in touch with the lady who got the note on the house. And she keeps saying, well, lady, do you, and I'm not going to say how much the money is. Lady, do you want to buy it? I told her if I had the money to buy it, I would have a lawyer to be out in California.
What about the city of Fairmont Heights? What are they saying about it?
Well, the city of Fairmont Heights, they're in a disarray. And they having problems financially, and then there's something going on in there.
Oh, I see.
So therefore,
but this is a citizen group.
That's a citizen group.
Wants
and if you own
to rehab, you basically you want to
had to own that house.
The Pittman home because of the historical background. You want to go through that historical background association with Booker T. Washington before we leave, okay?
Now, with the association with Booker T. Washington when he married Portia. And then they brought him here because that's where all the
Portia was
Booker T. Washington's
wife,
daughter.
A daughter.
Okay. And he bought and married Pittman and brought her here. And then she was he bought a piano and she was concert piano in Washington area. And she went to the White House.
But that was high society.
They were high society.
Was high society as far as black Americans was concerned.
Miss Roosevelt used to come here.
Yeah, all of it.
All of them. And
okay. That all of that's great. And what you want to do, you want to ride by this 505
Eastern Avenue.
Eastern Avenue. You know, what we want to do is save some of these historical sites. And once again, we honored the African American women with Ruth Brown and quite a few others. So what you want to do is continue. You know, Prince George County is a historical site itself. Okay, wait. See you next time. Oh, before I leave, congratulations to Bowie State for winning the CIAA. See you next time.
See you next time. How you